After the death of Hector, the Trojans remained within the protective walls of their city, nursing their grief and loss. However, a glimmer of hope rekindled their spirits when a formidable army of Amazons arrived, led by Queen Penthesilea, a daughter of Ares. Her heart's desire was to cross swords with the renowned Achilles, vowing to avenge the death of the valiant Hector. The conflict resumed on the open plain, with Penthesilea commanding the Trojan forces and Achilles and Ajax leading the Greeks. While Ajax successfully put the enemy to flight, Achilles was confronted by Penthesilea in a challenge to single combat. With great courage, she met him on the battlefield. Although she was a daughter of Ares, Penthesilea was, after all, a woman, and no matter how strong she was, Achilles' prowess was unmatched. Filled with noble chivalry, Achilles initially sought to spare the brave and beautiful Amazon warrior. It was only when his own life was in imminent peril that he made a serious effort to overcome her. Ultimately, Penthesilea met the same fate as all who dared to stand against Achilles. She fell by his hand. Realizing her fatal wounds, Penthesilea's thoughts turned to the desecration of Hector's body. She earnestly entreated Achilles for mercy. But her plea was hardly necessary, as Achilles, deeply moved by the bravery of his fallen adversary, gently lifted her from the ground, and she passed away in his arms. Upon seeing Achilles in possession of the dead queen, the Amazons and Trojans prepared for a fresh assault to reclaim her body. However, upon realizing their intentions, Achilles stepped forward and commanded them to halt. In a few well-chosen words, he extolled the great valor and fearlessness of the fallen queen. He expressed his readiness to return her body immediately. Achilles' chivalrous conduct won the admiration of both Greeks and Trojans. Only Thersites, a base and cowardly individual, cast aspersions on Achilles' noble intentions. Not content with his insinuations, he callously pierced the lifeless body of the Amazonian queen with his lance. In response, Achilles, with a single powerful blow, struck him down and ended his life. Thersites' deserved demise drew no sympathy, but his kinsman Diomedes demanded reparation for the murder of his relative. Agamemnon, who could have easily resolved the issue as the commander-in-chief, chose not to interfere. This apparent condemnation of Achilles' actions deeply wounded the proud hero's sensibilities. In response, he once again abandoned the Greek army and sailed to Lesbos. However, Odysseus pursued him to the island and, with his customary tact, convinced Achilles to return to the camp. As the Trojan War continued, the Trojans found a new ally in the formidable Memnon, the Ethiopian prince. Memnon, born of the dawn goddess Eos and Tithonus, led a powerful force of warriors from his land. Like Achilles, he was a child of a goddess, and Hephaestus had crafted him a splendid suit of armor. The clash between these two divine-born heroes was long anticipated, and even their mothers, Thetis and Eos, interceded with the mighty Zeus to safeguard their sons. However, Zeus, adhering to the fate determined by the Moirai, weighed their destinies in his golden scales. The weight of Memnon's fate ultimately tipped the balance, foreshadowing his death. Eos, burdened with despair, descended from Olympus to the battlefield. There, she discovered her son's lifeless body. Memnon, in a valiant defense, had finally succumbed to the indomitable strength of Achilles. He lay slain on the battlefield. In her grief, Eos summoned her children, the winds, who whisked Memnon's body through the air, protecting it from enemy desecration. Though Achilles achieved victory, it was short-lived. Drunk on his success, he led the Greek army in an attempt to storm the walls of Troy. Seizing the opportunity, Paris, aided by Phoebus Apollo, launched a fatal arrow that struck Achilles in his vulnerable heel. The great hero fell fatally wounded before the skiing gate. Despite facing impending death, Achilles, with astonishing resolve, continued to display his valor. Only when his weakening body could no longer stand did the enemy realize the gravity of his wound. Through a protracted and fierce battle led by Ajax and Odysseus, the Greek forces finally reclaimed Achilles' body. They brought him back to their camp. Thetis, weeping profusely over her gallant son's untimely demise, arrived to bid him a final farewell. Her lamentations echoed alongside the grief of the entire Greek army. Following the ancient custom, they lit a grand funeral pyre, and the Muses sang a mournful dirge. Achilles' body, consumed by the flames, turned into ashes, and his bones were carefully collected, placed in a golden urn, and laid beside his dearest friend Patroclus. In the solemn funeral games held in honor of the fallen hero, Thetis offered her son's possessions as the prize. However, it was unanimously decided that the magnificent armor crafted by Hephaestus should go to the one who had contributed most to the rescue of Achilles' body from the enemy's clutches. Popular opinion and the Trojan prisoners present at the battle overwhelmingly favored Odysseus. Unable to bear this slight, the once proud Ajax lost his sanity and tragically ended his own life. The Greeks found themselves facing a dire situation. Their bravest and mightiest leader, Achilles, had fallen in battle. Patroclus, who came close to matching his prowess, was gone as well. In the wake of this loss, the conflict came to a temporary halt. However, Odysseus, famed for his cunning, hatched a plan to capture Helenus, a son of Priam and a gifted prophet. Through clever tactics and a well-executed ambush, they brought the young Trojan prince into their control. Helenus, coerced by Odysseus, was compelled to use his gift of prophecy against the interests of his homeland. Helenus revealed 3 crucial conditions for Troy's conquest. First, the son of Achilles must fight with the Greeks. Second, the deadly arrows of Heracles should be employed against the Trojans. And third, they must obtain the treasured wooden image of Pallas Athene, known as the Palladium. The first condition proved achievable. Odysseus journeyed to Scyros, where he found Neoptolemus, Achilles' son. Instilling the fiery youth with a sense of duty, he relinquished his father's magnificent armor to him. Neoptolemus joined the Greek camp and immediately distinguished himself in battle, especially in single combat against Eurypylus, son of Telephus, who had sided with the Trojans. Securing the poison-tipped arrows of Heracles, however, proved a more challenging endeavor. They remained in the possession of Philoctetes, who, suffering from an unhealed wound, endured abject misery on the island of Lemnos. Through relentless efforts, Odysseus, accompanied by Diomedes, finally persuaded Philoctetes to return with them to the Greek camp, where he received healing from the skillful physician Machaon, son of Asclepius. Reconciled to Agamemnon, Philoctetes joined the battle and mortally wounded Paris, the son of Priam, with an arrow. However, Paris, aware of an oracle's prophecy that only his abandoned wife Oenone could cure his wound, had himself carried to her dwelling on Mount Ida. He beseeched her to save him, but Oenone, embittered by their past grievances, initially turned him away. Afterward, overwhelmed by remorse and love, she rushed to his aid. However, she arrived too late, finding Paris's lifeless body on a funeral pyre. In her despair, Oenone threw herself into the flames. With the third and most formidable condition still unmet, the Greek armies remained unable to conquer Troy. In this dire situation, the resourceful and devoted Odysseus once more stepped up to assist his comrades. He disguised himself by inflicting wounds upon himself and appeared as a pitiable beggar. Stealthily, he infiltrated Troy, seeking the location of the Palladium. With determination, Odysseus uncovered the secret, and only the fair Helen recognized him. Her heart had shifted back to her homeland and her husband Menelaus, following Paris's death. Helen, surprisingly, became an unexpected ally for the clever Greek. Upon Odysseus's return to the camp, he enlisted the aid of the valiant Diomedes. Together, they undertook the perilous task of procuring the Palladium from its sacred sanctuary. With all the required conditions met, they convened a council to decide on the final plan. Epios, a Greek sculptor, was tasked with constructing a colossal wooden horse, a cunning ploy to infiltrate Troy. It was large enough to conceal a group of skilled and distinguished Greek heroes. Once completed, the Greeks simulated departure, abandoning their camp and setting it ablaze, seemingly exhausted from the lengthy and seemingly fruitless 10-year siege. The Trojan horse, an artful creation, was left behind, and the Greek fleet sailed to the nearby island of Tenedos. There they anchored, eagerly awaiting a signal to return to the Trojan coast. The fate of Troy hung in the balance. As the Greek ships vanished into the horizon and the fires of their abandoned camp blazed high, the people of Troy emerged from their walls, finally believing that their foes had given up the long and arduous siege. Intrigued by the colossal wooden horse left behind, the Trojans gathered around it, curious about its purpose. Opinions on its nature were divided. Some viewed it as a possible engine of war and argued for its destruction, while others believed it to be a sacred idol, suggesting it be brought inside the city. Two remarkable events would sway the Trojans toward the latter decision. Laocoon, a priest of Apollo, stood as a chief skeptic regarding the colossal horse's true intentions. He and his two young sons had left the city to participate in a sacrifice to the gods. Urging his fellow Trojans not to place their trust in Greek offerings, Laocoon thrust a spear into the horse's side. At that moment, the concealed Greek heroes within the horse feared exposure, as the armor inside began to clatter. However, Pallas Athene, ever watchful over Greek interests, intervened to prevent discovery. She orchestrated a miraculous distraction to mislead the Trojans, who were ultimately destined to fall. While Laocoon prepared to make the sacrifice, two enormous serpents suddenly emerged from the sea. They entwined themselves around his sons, and then coiled around Laocoon himself as he rushed to save them. The three of them perished before the horrified onlookers. The Trojans, interpreting the gruesome deaths of Laocoon and his sons as divine punishment for sacrilege against the wooden horse, felt it must be dedicated to the gods. Unbeknownst to the Trojans, Odysseus had left his faithful companion, Sinon, behind with precise instructions. Playing the role assigned to him, Sinon approached King Priam in apparent captivity, his hands in chains, and with a heart-wrenching tale. He claimed that the Greeks had attempted to sacrifice him as a ritual offering, driven by an oracle's command. He went on to describe his miraculous escape and his plea for the king's protection. Compassionate King Priam believed Sinon's account. He released him from his bonds, offering his favor and requesting an explanation regarding the wooden horse. Sinon recounted a compelling tale. He explained that Pallas Athene, who had long aided the Greeks in the war, had become deeply offended when the Trojans removed her sacred image, the Palladium, from her temple in Troy. In her displeasure, the goddess had withdrawn her protection from the Greeks. Sinon further claimed that the Greek seer Calchas had advised building the massive wooden horse as an offering to appease the goddess's anger. This colossal structure was purposely constructed to be too large to enter the city, thus ensuring that Pallas Athene's favor could not be transferred to the Trojans. In their earnest belief that they were rectifying their wrongs, the Trojans accepted Sinon's explanation, never suspecting the peril that loomed behind the city's gates. Amidst the festivities, the unfortunate Cassandra, gifted with the foresight of doom, ran through the streets, her hair disheveled and her gestures wild. She tried to warn her fellow citizens about the impending peril of the wooden horse. But her passionate words fell on deaf ears, as had always been the fate of the unheeded prophetess. Once the Trojans had retired for the night, exhausted from their celebration, Sinon, in the secrecy of darkness, released the Greek heroes from their wooden prison. The signal was given, and the entire Greek army silently landed on the Trojan coast, leaving their ships off the island of Tenedos. Entering the city now posed no challenge, and a merciless slaughter commenced. The sleeping Trojans, under the leadership of their bravest warriors, fought valiantly but were gradually overwhelmed. The city was soon engulfed in flames. King Priam, as he prayed at the altar of Zeus for divine assistance, was slain by Neoptolemus. Meanwhile, Andromache, with her young son Astyanax, sought refuge at the tower's summit. The victors found her, and, fearing that Hector's son might one day seek vengeance, they tore the child from her arms and cast him from the tower. Only Aeneas, Aphrodite's son, found a way to escape the carnage, carrying his old father Anchises on his shoulders. They first sought refuge on Mount Ida, before fleeing to Italy, where Aeneas would become the legendary ancestor of the Roman people. Menelaus located Helen in the royal palace. As she was immortal, her beauty remained unchanged. A reconciliation occurred, and she accompanied her husband on the journey back home. Andromache, Hector's widow, was given in marriage to Neoptolemus. Cassandra became Agamemnon's possession, while Hecuba, the aged, widowed queen, was captured by Odysseus. The vast wealth of the Trojan king fell into the hands of the Greek heroes, and they razed Troy to the ground before preparing for their long-awaited homeward voyage.
If you liked this video and would like to know what preceded these events, here are 2 more parts of this epic saga. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. Have a mythical day, and thank you for stopping by.